Machiavelli understood something that most people only learn after it's too late, that the moment you let the public see your weakness, you have handed every person in that room a map to exactly where you can be broken. You already know this feeling, the moment you vented your frustration in the wrong room and watched the dynamic shift, the time you shared a plan before it was finished and felt the energy drain out of it, the conversation where you showed too much and spent the next week trying to recover what you gave away for free. By the end of this, you'll understand the 5 specific things that the most strategically dangerous people in history never revealed in public, and why protecting them isn't coldness. It's the most calculated form of self-preservation that exists. The public arena operates on a single law that most people spend their entire lives ignoring. Perception is not a reflection of reality. It is reality, and whatever you show people in a public setting becomes the permanent lens through which they evaluate everything you do afterward. Show weakness once in the wrong room, and it calcifies into the story they tell about you when you're not there. This is an intelligence. The strategist understands this, not as a reason to perform strength, but as a reason to reveal nothing that hasn't been deliberately chosen. The first thing you must never reveal in public is the full weight of your emotional state. This isn't about becoming someone who feels nothing. The strategist feels everything, sometimes more deeply than the people around them, precisely because they're paying close attention to the room. What they control is the gap between feeling something and showing it. When you allow your frustration, your fear, or your disappointment to surface publicly before you've processed it privately, you're not being authentic. You're being readable, and a readable person is a manageable person. The moment someone in your environment knows which words make your face change, which situations make your voice tighten, or which topics make you defensive, they own a lever that they didn't earn and that you handed them without realizing it. Note on rep. Your emotional state is yours. It belongs in the private space where you can examine it clearly. What the public gets to see is the result of that examination, not the raw material. Think about the colleague who lets their irritation show in every meeting where their idea gets challenged. Within weeks, the room has learned to use that irritation strategically. Some push the button to derail the conversation. Others use it as a signal of where to probe for weakness in negotiations. They never had to study this person deliberately. The person taught them voluntarily. Compare that to the one who sits through challenge with the same unreadable composure, regardless of how they feel underneath. The room doesn't know where the edges are, and without that knowledge, they proceed with caution. Caution creates space. Space is leverage. The second thing you must never reveal publicly is an unfinished plan. There's a specific kind of energy that exists inside a goal that hasn't been spoken yet. It's compressed, pressurized, and entirely yours. The moment you release it through your mouth before the work is done, 2 things happen simultaneously. Oh, I don't. First, your brain receives a small neurological reward simply from the act of sharing, which reduces the urgency that was driving the actual execution. Second, you introduce other people's doubt, skepticism, or misplaced enthusiasm into a space that only your clarity should occupy. Neither of these serves the plan. Neither of these serves you. The most dangerous strategic minds in history shared their objectives only after they were irreversible, not because they were secretive for its own sake, but because they understood that a plan spoken too early is a plan that now has to survive the weight of other people's limited imagination. Your vision is calibrated to your own understanding of what's possible. The person you tell it to is calibrating it against their own fears and their own ceiling. Let the result announce itself. Let the outcome be the first thing the public hears. By then, there's nothing left to argue with. This is where the 200 mark usually finds people nodding along to the principle, but quietly exempting themselves from it. Because the urge to share a plan before it's finished isn't actually about the plan. It's about needing the room's permission to believe in it. And that need is the weakness the plan's silence was protecting you from having to feel. The third thing you must never reveal publicly is the full extent of your struggle. This is the most misunderstood of the 5, because modern culture has built an entire infrastructure around the performance of vulnerability. The struggle post, the raw and honest moment, the carefully timed admission of difficulty. And the key word in all of that is performance. Strategic thinkers understand the difference between vulnerability that builds genuine trust with people who have earned it, and struggle that's broadcast to an audience who will use it to reposition you in their mental hierarchy of who matters and who doesn't. Public struggle, particularly in professional or competitive environments, almost never produces the sympathy it's designed to attract. It produces the opposite, a quiet recalibration of how much weight people are willing to give your opinion, your leadership, and your judgment going forward. The room that watched you struggle will reference that moment indefinitely, even unconsciously, the next time you ask them to follow your lead somewhere uncertain. This doesn't mean denying that difficulty exists. It means choosing with surgical precision who gets access to that reality. The person who has consistently demonstrated loyalty under pressure. They earn that access. The public arena does not. The fourth thing you must never reveal publicly is the identity of your real alliances. Loyalty shown publicly becomes leverage for your opponents. The moment a rival understands who matters to you, who you trust, whose opinion changes your thinking, they have a second vector of attack that has nothing to do with coming at you directly. They approach the person you trust. They plant doubt. They create friction. They introduce a narrative that travels through your alliance back to you, distorted and weaponized. The strategist keeps their real circle private, not because they're ashamed of it, but because visibility is vulnerability. When it comes to the people you actually rely on, what the public sees should be a curated version of your network, enough to signal stability, not enough to hand anyone a map to the foundation. Machiavelli wrote extensively about this dynamic in a different context, but with the same underlying logic. The prince who makes his dependencies obvious gives his enemies a manual for destabilizing him without ever having to confront him directly. The principle translates perfectly into every modern environment where power operates through relationships rather than formal authority, which is every environment worth being in. The fifth thing you must never reveal publicly is the fact that you've been wounded. This is the hardest one, because the instinct to let people know that what they did landed, that it mattered, that it cost you something, is one of the most human impulses that exists. It feels like justice. It feels like honesty. But in a public setting, showing that you've been wounded is not justice, and it's not honesty. It's a signal that the attack was effective, and effective attacks get repeated. The person or situation that cost you something already took what it took. Revealing publicly that the damage registered doesn't recover it. It just confirms the location of the wound for anyone watching who might want to test the same spot later. The response that actually protects you is the one that denies the public confirmation that anything landed at all. Not a performance of being fine, which is just as readable as the wound itself. A genuine return to the work, the composure, and the direction you were moving before the disruption. The room that expected to see the damage register instead sees someone who apparently moved straight past it. And that reading, deserved or not, repositioned you in a way that the most articulate defense of yourself never could. Here's the realization that sits underneath all five of protecting what you reveal in public isn't a strategy for hiding who you are. It's a strategy for controlling who gets access to it. The emotion, the plan, the struggle, the alliance, the wound, none of those things disappear because you don't perform them publicly. They exist. They're real. They belong to the private space where you can examine them clearly and share them deliberately with the people who have actually earned that level of access. What you're doing by keeping them out of the public arena is refusing to let the wrong audience set the terms of how your reality gets interpreted. The people who seem most untouchable in any room aren't the ones who feel less. They're the ones who made a quiet, permanent decision about what the public gets to see, and then held that decision with enough discipline that it stopped feeling like discipline at all and became simply the way they move. That's not performance. That's sovereignty. If this landed in a way that changes how you walk into the next room you're in, that recognition is the entire point. If you want to understand what happens at the deepest level when you've mastered all five of these and the people around you can no longer read your position at all, Watch, never defend yourself. Let silence do the work. Next, take care of yourself.